I was so happy that one of my high school teachers and now a career mentor, Mrs. Connie Maier, agreed to join me on the podcast. Mrs. Maier grew up in Whitewood and attended the school that she herself would one day teach at. In recent years, she has filled an administrative role where she is currently our school's principal. After 31 years of teaching, she is retiring, but don't worry, students, you may still see her friendly smile around the school. I hope every student that goes through the school system is as fortunate as I was to have a teacher as kind and caring as Mrs. Maier. This is our 5th episode of Community Conversations. I'm your host, Kathryn. Let's converse. So why don't we start off with you sharing a little bit about why you wanted to become a teacher?
Well, it was not that difficult of a decision to start with, really, because I enjoyed school myself. I really like working with young people, and I like to help people. And so that was what better way than by teaching, being able to interact with people and not just having like an office job, but being able to work with people. So I liked school myself, so I wanted to see if I could make it enjoyable for others.
So why don't you tell us briefly a little bit about your career path, like what schools you worked at, what positions you've held?
Okay, well, I was in Whitewood School myself as a student from kindergarten to grade 12. So after I convocated from the U of R, I got a teaching job out in Dinsmore, Saskatchewan, which was a great little place to work. I was there for 3 years, teaching middle years science and math and English. And then, you won't believe this, but it was difficult to get a job in Whitewood back then. And I had to give up a full-time position in Dinsmore to get a half-time position here when Russ Hamilton retired. And there's been no turning back from there. I've been in Whitewood School ever since. Mainly teaching in the high school, English, math, and every subject really, but really focusing in on English and math towards the end of my teaching portion. And then in 2016, I jumped into the administration and was vice principal with Brenda Dowd for a few years. And then these last couple of years, just ending things up with being principal myself.
So what are some memorable moments along that journey?
Well, there's lots of moments, and it usually isn't when you're teaching in the classroom, which is kind of weird because really in academics, that's teaching is what you do, is you're supposed to be teaching the academics. But I remember things like class decorating contests where students wanted to come in the evening. Can you come back at 7, Mrs. Maier? Yeah, and we would decorate into the evening and having the big proud moment if our class won, or all of the teamwork and the school spirit that went into that. I enjoyed my work with SLC, working with students and planning the retreats out at Knossi, helping students bring to life school spirit activities and bringing the engagement and fun into learning. I kind of created that sense of belonging. Getting back to the academics, it is really important when I think back of all the students that I feel I may have helped along the way who might have had a pretty tough journey to graduate, and they succeeded and they did graduate. And looking back where I was so proud of their success stories and how far they had come. So that's really important too, is just being able to help the students.
That's awesome. So education, just like other fields and really society in general, is constantly changing. And so, even I graduated 4 years ago. And I come back into the school and it's the same school. There's different parts of it because it's just the field is changing rapidly. So why don't you speak to a little bit about the change that you've seen throughout your career?
I guess I would speak to schools more than just the typical reading, writing, and arithmetic. And I would think that's the biggest shift that I've seen over the last 30 years is that, you're really concentrating on working with the whole student, not just an academic piece, but the emotional well-being and just making sure that you're giving them a well-rounded education. I think there's more responsibility placed on the school system to be their place of support, no matter what it would look like. So even though academics are still really important, really focusing in on, the root cause to why students might be having difficulty or what we can do to help them to be the best that they can be and reach their potential. So I would say that shift definitely is looking at the whole person.
Definitely something that even in my university classes, that's something that we focus on a lot is that whole person. I'm going to throw a curveball at you, but what about in technology senses? How do you feel technology has affected the education field?
It has helped immensely in lots of areas where I think of, the Gestetner photocopier or having to have everything in print, but then moving on to the use of smart boards and being able to bring in that technology and in a little bit more engaging way. And I think maybe as I'm retiring out, I kind of appreciate the skills and the technology savvy that the younger teachers have, where I feel like maybe I'm not as experienced in that anymore, or to keep up with the times. But that said, there is something about social interaction and just working together as a group, and the importance of making sure that technology doesn't take over a student's life, and that they're not interacting with people anymore, that they get too involved in technology. But I would say overall, it definitely has made education a way to be more engaging.
That's awesome. So what is an important lesson that you yourself have learned in your career?
Well, as much as you know that I like to talk a lot, as you can see, I think the biggest thing is to listen, because people need to be heard, especially in the office, or even as a teacher with, maybe student disputes or any kind of conflict. People just want to be heard and share their perspective, because oftentimes it's not about somebody lying or being untruthful. It's their perspective, and that's how they saw the situation. And then when you're able to hear people out and then kind of explain maybe the background to it or the pieces that they're missing, I find that resolution comes about and everybody kind of walks away happier. And humor, absolute humor. I think it keeps us sane, or as close to sane as we can be at times, because it's an emotional business and there's lots of tough days. And I think keeping a sense of humor is really important. And that whole time about taking time to process what comes my way before making a decision or responding. And then at the end of the day, as long as people around me feel, whether they're staff or students, feel seen and valued, the rest kind of falls into place.
So every teacher has heard this at some point, and I'm getting prepared to hear this, especially in high school when they're thinking a little bit more on their own, which is the biggest question: why is school important?
Well, that is a good question, because when it's been my whole life, I obviously think school is important. Well, first of all, I would say that education is important in general as the foundation to future opportunities, whether it's career-wise or just building that knowledge that you need to be successful in life. As I mentioned before, the school system teaches the whole person. So especially in that maybe 7, 8, 9 area where do you actually remember what you learned? Well, hopefully you remember what you learned in math, but in all of the subjects. Or is it more so the work ethic or the responsibility or following directions or working through the process and learning those organizational skills? So I think education is important there. And providing opportunities that a student might not normally have the chance to participate in some situations, being able to think for yourself, and building that community. I think the importance, or one of the, responsibilities, I'd say, of education is building contributing citizens. So yeah, I think it's pretty important.
One thing that I'm just going to touch on, something you said, is providing opportunity. Our school pairs with other schools. We have a really unique opportunity to provide more options for our students. Do you want to talk about that program?
Yeah, I think you're referring to the magnet programming.
Yes.
Yeah. And that was something that was fostered quite a few years ago, where when you talk about maybe a rural school versus an urban school, where, if you only have 20 students in a class, you can't really, if there's 3 different subjects they want to take, you can't put 7 students in a class. It's too small. So we've partnered with Kipling and Broadview School, and instead of possibly offering 3 elective choices for the grade 10s to 12s, we pool all the students together in those 3 buildings, and we have an opportunity for 9 electives to be had, whether it's the 3 that we have in Whitewood, or 2 in Broadview, or 4 in Kipling. And so it just opens opportunity for students to participate in things like welding or cosmetology, cooking, photography, forensic science, where in our school we wouldn't be able to provide all of those opportunities if it was just us.
I went through that program myself, so I really enjoyed that. And I think it does provide an opportunity, because as you're talking about the whole student, it's not just about your writing and your math and your reading. It's also about other skills that you can get, like maybe from a cooking class. And you also touched on something there about urban and rural schools, and I think sometimes we forget about the role of a school has in a community, and I think that's kind of heightened in a rural community. So why don't you touch on that aspect of the school playing a part in our community?
Yeah. I mean, it's fair to say that an urban school would have more opportunity, perhaps with some class choices or, more variety because you have more students to work with. But I think rural school is important because we can make it personal, I think. We know the students and we know their families. We can make the time for them in a smaller setting and build on that support system. Like, I know every student in my school by name. I know a lot about them, and there's a lot of interaction that goes on. And when you're in a small town, the school can be one of the centers of the town, just like the rink. So it can be the safe place for students, or we're able to make events like, say, Grandparents' Day or graduation a little bit more personal. And it becomes part of the community, and, community engagement really is, school is one of the places that people gather to interact with one another.
Right, and I mean, even like our Christmas concert is a staple where like community members come out to watch. I mean, whether they have grandchildren in the school or it's their kids, that's a place where we gather, or even the graduation when the community comes to celebrate having kids finish their schooling and moving on to the next chapter of their life. So I think that's a really cool thing about rural communities and the small schools within them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, congratulations are in order because you're hitting a big milestone, which is retirement. So how many years have you been teaching?
This is my 31st year in education, teaching and administration. So yeah.
Nice. And so what is one thing you're going to miss about not being in the school?
I think the daily interaction with so many people, whether it be the students or the colleagues that I worked with, and feeling that connection. So that'll be difficult to be maybe like on the outside of that.
Fair enough. Is it the same thing with teachers as it is with farmers, where they like never can quite retire fully? Are you planning on coming back and subbing, or?
I definitely plan to sub. I don't think I can leave the school after all these years cold turkey, and it will be nice to still be in the building and involved, but just maybe in a smaller capacity. It hasn't really sunk in that that's not where I'm going in the fall. So I definitely will have to wean myself off gradually, I think.
Yeah, that's fair. I think for me, often the changes don't hit until like the first day of school. And it's like, oh, wait, I'm not going back to that place or doing that thing. What's one thing you're excited for, though, in your retirement?
I'm excited to maybe finally become a little bit more organized. I don't know. I just feel like being, whether it was the administrator or a teacher or whatever, it's just such a big part of my life. Like, it's really a part of my identity if I think back to it. Like, that's just who I feel, how I am. And so thinking about school in the evenings or on the weekend or, maybe August, is just always there. And I'm never done the list. I'm always working on it, but I never completely finish. But it's my normal. So it hasn't really sunk in yet what it would feel like to be caught up. And maybe you never have that even in retirement, because there's always things to do. So, that balancing act, I think I'm looking forward to having a little bit more family time. The kids have been really great throughout the years, and Tony's been awesome. But just being able to take some time to slow down a little bit. I don't know what that looks like yet, but time for some of those other jobs that I kind of keep putting off, and spending some time with my new granddaughter. So I want to make sure that I have time for that. Yeah.
That's awesome. And your granddaughter actually has a special birthday because she was the first baby born in 2025 in Saskatchewan?
Well, not quite Saskatchewan,
Or
Regina. Baby in Saskatchewan beat her by, 30 minutes. But yeah, she was the first baby born in Regina. Yeah, the New Year's baby.
Yeah, that's so sweet. So what advice would you like to give students, like maybe your graduating class or the ones that, because you're retiring and leaving in the hands of the rest of the staff?
I would say to appreciate whatever stage you're at. Don't wish your life away, and you need to put the work in, but take time to enjoy, to find that balance. And it seems like those graduates are always in such a hurry to move on to the next step, but just be happy where you're at. And I know that it's really, really cliche, but time really does go quickly. So just enjoy the moment that you're in.
And selfishly, I'm going to ask this question for myself, but maybe someone listening, they might also benefit from it. What advice would you give new teachers?
Teaching will be your life for a while, and it's long hours. So put the work in at the start and set up that foundation, because it will pay off in the long run. And you know what? It's never going to be a 9 to 3:30 job, but every minute put in was worth it. So just find the balance, but you're going to have to put the time in.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It has been a pleasure to talk with you. Is there any final things that you'd like to say to either students or staff or community?
Well, I'd like to thank you for having me. This was like a new experience. I still feel like we're talking about somebody else and not me, but I appreciate the opportunity to share. So thank you.